My name's Justin LeClue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we're talking about one of the greatest action filmmakers ever, Yuen Woo-ping.
You know, in the 2000s, seemingly every action movie was promoted as being from the fight choreographer behind Kill Bill, The Matrix, and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. He also lent his talents to such high-profile U.S. releases as Kung Fu Hustle, The Forbidden Kingdom, Fearless, The Grandmaster, and Unleashed.
And for the love of all that is sacred, please, if you meet him in the street, do not ask him about those movies. There is a Lincoln Center interview with him where he came and took some award and they screened a bunch of his films. And they even say during the Q&A, please don't ask him about the American films. He's probably answered over and over and over again questions about those films.
And they're nowhere near his best work.
No! And I think that's why he looks at them and he's like, this is what people will mostly remember me by worldwide? Is this? Like The Matrix. So good, amazing movie, great action choreography. Compared to what he was doing 25 years before, baby time.
There is a category at the Hong Kong Film Awards for Best Action Choreography, which is something that would be unthinkable at the Oscars. But, you know, the thing is, with some of the movies that Yuen Woo-ping worked on, he really almost rises to the level of co-author. I mean, Once Upon a Time in China 2 is almost as much a Yuen Woo-ping movie as it is a Choi Hark movie.
Absolutely. When he's choreographing things, like a lot of Hong Kong productions, usually the action choreographer, especially if they have a particular stature, they not only shoot the action scenes, they also control the camera on the action scenes, and they edit the action scenes. So it is completely their baby. And if there's a lot of those in a movie, then they are essentially the co-director of the films.
And when I think of Yuen Woo-ping, I mean, look, I'm no expert. I'm no guy who can really tell you the ins and outs of martial arts choreography, but I do know just the general sense that I get, the general vibe. And when I think of Yuen Woo-ping, there are a couple of people who are just real trendsetters in the golden age of Hong Kong action movies. You know, Bruce Lee had a particular style, the Shaw brothers as well, and the artists associated with them. And I think of him as being the guy who came after them, who really turned everything on its head and created a much more kind of acrobatic, free-flowing, anything goes martial arts style. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, it could be argued that there were a lot of people working around him that were also doing that kind of stuff, that before he directed his big motion pictures that we'll talk about in a little while, that they were kind of moving towards there. But he's the one that I feel kind of synthesized all of those things, that he is not only a great choreographer, he is a great filmmaker in that he understands how to show the audience this kind of stuff in a very concrete way that is easy to understand, that makes the impossible possible in a way that you couldn't imagine anyone would be able to execute. I've seen him talk about in interviews that he's always thinking about action, and he's a very reactive guy in the sense that he sees what people are doing and he tries to either move beyond it or find a reflective way to approach it and do something that is in the other direction but is also building upon it.
Well, Bruce Lee died just when he was breaking out. It's hard to imagine Bruce Lee adapting with the times. He was a purist. He believed very strongly in a very minimalist fighting style, a very direct and strong fighting style. But somebody like Yuen Woo-ping, you know, he came along at a time when the Chinese opera, the Peking opera, ended just as this whole generation of people were coming out of it. And so they all they all found jobs in the Hong Kong film industry instead as stuntmen, because that was the closest thing to a lateral skill. Yuen Woo-ping is somebody who was able to harness the particular skill sets of those people into creating this style that was sort of like the polar opposite of Bruce Lee's, you know?
If you want to see what the Bruce Lee style would look like, choreographed by Yuen Woo-ping, just turn on a little film called Game of Death 2, which he choreographed.
I love Game of Death 2 because
it's as far as Bruce Lee as you can get.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Everyone likes Bruce Lee, but people only like Bruce Lee's style if Bruce Lee's doing it. You know, if he's not actually there alive to do it, they want to see something with a little more bells and whistles.
Yep, and that's what you get in Game of Death 2. Yuen Woo-ping, he was working alongside Bruce Lee, and it's interesting that he never kind of went into imitating his style. Like you mentioned, he grew up in the Peking opera milieu, that he was trained by his dad, Simon Yun, but he wasn't technically in a Peking opera school. And I've seen him say in interviews that his dad was very tough, like a lot of those teachers were, but he was not as tough as the teachers that Sammo and Jackie Chan had, in that while they would maybe get corporal punishment, they were not hit on the head with a stick until they bled.
Also, I get the sense that Yuen Woo-ping came from not quite the destitution and poverty that Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung did. So, when we talk about Yuen Woo-ping, we're talking about a whole dynasty. He's merely the most famous member of this family of choreographers and martial artists.
The Young Bros.
His father, who you mentioned, was Yuen Su-tin, better known here as Simon Yun. Fans of kung fu movies will know that he was the master in Jackie Chan's breakout hit Drunken Master.
Directed by Yuen Woo-ping.
He also was the father of 11 children. That's a very busy man. Yuen Woo-ping trained, as you said, in Peking opera. Through his father's connections, I think, he appeared in a number of films. Beginning in the 1960s, his father worked as a choreographer on the Wong Fei Hung series.
He had a role as well in the Wong Fei Hung series.
That's right. And that was a series of almost 100 movies made in the 50s and 60s in Hong Kong, which were basically ground zero of Hong Kong martial arts movies. Wong Fei Hung was this famous Chinese herbalist and folk hero, and these were very low budget, kind of primitive movies about his exploits.
Well, the Wong Fei Hung films, they like to talk about that they kind of figured out martial arts choreography in the evolution of them. That it started very much like early Hollywood pictures where it's like, all right, get the stuntmen, have them fight. And then it moved on to, okay, let's choreograph stuff. That the actors themselves were choreographing it at first. And then they slowly figured out, oh, what can we do as camera moves? And this series lasted a long time. And it's a little bit unfortunate that it's not very available either.
I've never seen any of them, it's too bad, they were very popular in Hong Kong.
I've only seen the first part, and that's because someone from the Hong Kong Film Archives brought it to Toronto and screened it.
Yeah.
And so as a kid, Yuen Woo-ping worked with his family, Peking opera, and like Will mentioned, in films as well. He said that he would just take whatever job was offered to him. Eventually, film became the more financially viable thing, and because he was learning the ropes, appearing as extras, and even stuff like Shaw Brothers films, you can see him show up in the Anonymous Heroes as like just a goon that shows up for a while.
He's a random kung fu student in The One-Armed Swordsman from 1968, which was one of the moments where the genre really came of age. His first credit as a choreographer was on a 1971 movie called The Mad Killer, which was directed by Eng Si-yoon. Eng Si-yoon was a sort of Roger Corman-ish figure in Hong Kong in the way that, he made low-budget movies. He had a great eye for talent, hungry young talent, and many stars came out of Eng Si-yoon.
Eng Si-yoon was the guy that, well, we don't need to shoot in Hong Kong. Why don't we go shoot in Korea instead? Because it's cheaper. That's a real, like, Roger Corman shooting Puerto Rico kind of move.
So for a number of years, Yuen Woo-ping worked as a choreographer for Eng Si-yoon, for the Shaw Brothers, for various people. In 1978, Eng Si-yoon started his own company, and Eng Si-yoon saw that there was this struggling young actor named Jackie Chan who hadn't quite found his niche, but he saw something in him.
And Yuen Woo-ping said that when he saw Jackie just do a few moves for him, he said, okay, there's a lot here that I can work with. So in his directorial debut, Snake and the Eagle Shadow, 1978, they just locked on to what Jackie was very good at, and Yuen Woo-ping could do it in an incredibly efficient way that unfortunately the filmmakers that had been working with Jackie before in stuff like Half a Loaf of Kung Fu, they didn't have that kind of understanding of the genre that Yuen Woo-ping does.
Half a Loaf of Kung Fu is one of the better of the early ones.
It is, yeah. But it is a very formless one, and the silliness kind of overpowers any of the martial arts.
Yuen Woo-ping's directorial career really hits the ground running. The first is Snake and the Eagle's Shadow. The second is Drunken Master, which became an unprecedented hit in Hong Kong, and one of my very favorite movies, honestly.
I mean, Drunken Master is so good. It understands Jackie so well. It's packed with unforgettable action.
It's lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, there's no flab to it. And that no flab thing, it's not the case all the time with Yuen Woo-ping, but when it comes to all action choreographers as directors, I feel that he is number one when it comes to delivering the goods, when he jumps from kind of trend to trend and puts his own stamp on it.
These early Yuen Woo-ping directorial movies, though, there's just something, I mean, they're very cheap. They feel very spontaneous. There's this really rambunctious energy. They're quite crude and rude.
Crude and rude. Will Sloan. Put it on the box.
Just like Bart Simpson.
Cowabunga.
A lot of vulgar comedy, but just like unbelievable action choreography.
After those two Jackie Chan films, they really pressed Yuen Woo-ping to continually kind of deliver on that premise. Like, give us another Jackie Chan. He tried with his brother Yung Sheng Yi in Dance of the Drunk Mantis. Didn't really take, unfortunately.
I love Dance of the Drunk Mantis, though.
Amazing movie.
Yeah.
And then they tried again with The Magnificent Butcher, and the logical extension of Jackie Chan is Sammo Hung. But the movie itself, while it's one that got a lot of play in North America, because it was released by Fox many years ago on DVD, I don't think it would be one of Yuen Woo-ping's best. It feels like what a film that everybody that's involved with it was making while doing 5 other films, as is the Hong Kong style.
This is The Magnificent Butcher?
Yes.
I like Magnificent Butcher.
I mean, it's good.
I kind of don't have a lot to say about it, just because it's kind of like any of the other ones from this period, you
But
know?
I feel that in this movie, how you talked about that Drunken Master is lightning in a bottle, you don't get that feeling of Sammo in this film.
Yes, it feels like trying to recreate Drunken Master.
And they don't find the hook. Like, Drunken Master is so easy to explain to someone. Even Snake and the Eagle Shadow is. While Magnificent Butcher is like so much stuff, it's formless. Will you be surprised to learn it was written by Wong Jing? And while the finale of Sammo Hung getting a bunch of styles against the bad guy, great stuff, you don't have that like one drunken style that you can kind of build upon. So it's mostly something that you would watch like, oh, that was really good. Even as an entire thing, it doesn't quite click in the way that I would say most Yuen Woo-ping films do. When we talk about Hong Kong cinema a lot, especially action films, I feel there's a caveat of like, listen, these were made up on the spot, so they're kind of, all over the place when you watch them. Even Jackie Chan's best films are like that. While Yuen Woo-ping, it feels much more solid.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a delicate balance in Yuen Woo-ping's best movies of they do feel kind of like they were made up on the spot. Some of them do have an anything goes quality, but then they're all grounded in this incredible precision and discipline. They're not like, you look at some of the bad Bruceploitation movies of the time, and the fight scenes look like they were just made up on the spot in the worst way. It's just people flailing around and throwing their fists until the quota is reached. But the fights in a Yuen Woo-ping movie, consistently they have an idea and they tell a story.
Yeah, that's them at their best. And I think those are at their most imaginative in the films that he made that are Yuen Clan movies, where he and his brothers all work together in front and behind the camera to bring to the screen. Now, technically, the first one is Dreadnought from 1981, and that is solid gold classic. Yung Biu stars in it. One of, the stars of Hong Kong action cinema. He worked a lot. Doesn't have that much North American fandom, other than if you're a really hardcore Hong Kong guy. And Dreadnought is great because it's that beautiful Hong Kong, like, man, every action scene has an idea. It's also tonally all over the map, going from comedy to like brutal violence. The film is a slasher picture, basically a martial arts slasher. And if you haven't seen this one, highly recommend it, especially as a Yuen Woo-ping directed vehicle.
This week I watched The Miracle Fighters from 1982, which is another Yuen Clan movie.
Yeah, now, so this is a Yuen Clan period that when they were all tripping on acid, man.
I'm having trouble summarizing the plot of this one, which goes all over the place.
Yeah, there's like a sorcerer's competition, which is how it ends.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it has a bit of the Drunken Master thing of like there are these two masters who are training a guy, but what matters is there's lots of kooky stuff, especially in the last third of the movie where he's in this bizarre kind of dream space and there are snakes everywhere. And
now
I'm failing so hard at this episode, I don't know how to summarize this
an interview with Yuen Woo-ping, he said that Miracle Fighters took almost a year to shoot. And when you watch the movie, I understand why that's the case. Because for us to like talk about, there's a scene where there's like a 10-foot wooden guy that fights someone, or they battle on ropes over pits of snakes, you're like, well, how would that exist?
I mean, that scene is incredible.
Yeah, like, it's so good. And it's just Yuen Woo-ping, through just sheer understanding of what film can do, can bring all these impossible things to life. Not only put them on screen, make them exciting, and also very funny. Hong Kong comedy,
well, they're not for us.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But like, this is something that I thought about while watching Magnificent Butcher, is that Sammo Hung is not a particularly funny director. Like his comedies, I was like, like Will said, it's not for me. But like the Yuen Woo-ping films, I like very easily understand those comedic concepts because they're often very big, and it's the sheer kind of imagination that's on display that gets the laugh out of me.
Yeah, there's a beauty to the Miracle Fighters, I
mean, there's also beauties of stuff like Shaolin Drunkard or Taoism Drunkard. I mean, back in the days where you would stumble upon a website like badmovies.org, like you could not escape the chompy watermelon that is it Shaolin Drunkard or Taoism Drunkard?
Oh, God. I know I've seen it.
I mean, they all mix
I
together
think
in
it's
our
Taoism Drunkard. Yeah.
Where it's just like this watermelon with teeth. It's like, "Har, har, 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 har." And you're like, wait, what would that be? Well, you got to see the movie because it is indescribable beyond that just one blow line and the acceptance that Yuen Woo-ping, he pulls it off.
So one of the things that's most notable about Yuen Woo-ping was and is his remarkable ability to adapt to the times. So in the mid-'80s, after that early kung fu comedy period, after the sort of fantastical period that encompassed the Miracle Fighters, as well as some lesser efforts like Close Encounters of the Vampire, he transitioned to much harder-edged action movies, modern action movies in urban settings.
Well, that's after he tried to make someone the new Jackie Chan. Something about Yuen Woo-ping you'll see throughout his career is that he'll kind of zone in on one actor and like try his best to make him a success. And that actor was Donnie Yen. Because after that fantastical period, he tried to redo the Jackie Chan thing with a film called Drunken Tai Chi, starring Donnie.
As well as a movie called Mismatched Couples,
which will pop up every 6 months on Twitter. Someone will post the opening sequence of Donnie Yen breakdancing, a very young Donnie, and it will go viral because it is bananas.
We once saw Donnie Yen speak, and he talked about Mismatched Couples, and he says there's a scene in that movie where he threw himself into a concrete wall, because that's what you do in the Hong Kong film industry, and he said he knew that it would lead to catastrophic consequences for him. He did it anyway. He's still feeling the pain from throwing himself into a concrete wall 40 years later.
He says he can't sleep on a particular side anymore.
Yeah.
Can you imagine every time he feels that twinge, he thinks of like Mismatched Couples?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a movie that is like towards the bottom of Yuen Woo-ping's letterbox page.
Absolutely. Yeah. But does have the novelty of co-starring Yuen Woo-ping as Donnie's master in the film.
So the Tiger Cage movies, which are 3 actually unrelated crime dramas, newly available on Blu-ray from 88 Films. I watched the first one. I was impressed by just kind of like how hardcore it is. I think it's best summarized by a scene where early on Donnie Yen dies, spoiler. He gets shot in the middle of the forehead, and then he turns around and blood is spewing like from between his eyes, and he steps forward with a betrayed look on his eyes, and then he of course gets blasted a few more times to go down, and none of that is played for laughs.
No, I mean, Yuen Woo-ping jumps into this kind of John Woo defined heroic bloodshed world, and he brings his own style to it, which includes Verhoeven style squibs. Every time someone gets shot in this, it's like big and chunky and rips off most of their shirt.
And the sound effects, I mean, obviously in Hong Kong action movies, the sound effects are always a little bit heavy, but like every gunshot is like a cannon blast in this movie.
And Yuen Woo-ping, what he brings to these movies is his grounded style of choreography, even though that it is urban and there's not a lot of wire work in it. You just get that painful, every time someone's thrown up in the air, they're going to come crashing down on a table and or chair.
It's funny. I do see the Yuen Woo-ping in this, but like his choreography style, as distinctive as it is, can be so wildly varied, because something like Iron Monkey is a whole different end of the spectrum from Tiger Cage. Like Tiger Cage, as you say, is grounded. It's acrobatic. It's sort of wild and impressive, but it's not like Iron Monkey where there's so much wire work, and there's that incredible scene towards the end where Donnie Yen is like
fighting on just giant pieces of wood, and there's flames underneath them too.
That's right. They're jumping from pole to pole on top of this fiery pit. I mean, I'm not quite sure how to account for the auteur thing that links all of these
I think
scenes.
that Yuen Woo-ping just understands what kind of movies that he's making. Because if you watch a lot of like Tiger Cage style ripoff films that were released by, countries like Taiwan, there will be that dissonance of like, there's crazy wire work and everything is sped up. And like Yuen Woo-ping knows that to make this movie work, he doesn't need to do those things, that he needs to find another way to express these action ideas, this adrenaline and this involvement in the physical feats that you're seeing on screen. And it's all there in Tiger Cage. And it's also interesting that while unrelated, Tiger Cage 2 is kind of him refining the process and understanding, oh, okay, I don't have to do gun stuff. Like Tiger Cage 2 is mostly the Donnie Yen show, in the same way that In the Line of Duty is a Cynthia Can Donnie Yen mostly fight film. That like he's moving away from guns, which, he's very good at. He would also approach in his Die Hard ripoff Red Wolf that he made in 1995. But it's not really, you get the sense, the thing that he likes to work with the most. He likes doing kind of the physicality of hand-to-hand or weapon-style combat.
So, I mean, after the crime movies of the mid-'80s, he he jumps on board the big kung fu revival of the late 80s and early 90s.
Which he pretty much kicked off with Once Upon a Time in China, 1 and 2. He worked a little bit on Once Upon a Time in China. Basically, he came in near the end, and he's the one, I believe, who choreographed the jaw-dropping fighting on the ladders action scene.
Which, I mean, that's a quintessential Yuen Woo-ping scene where it's grounded in one particularly great idea, which is what if you had a fight scene with these gigantic ladders that keep rising and falling? And that's the thing that grounds like all these spectacular feats of agility.
And it should be pointed out that Yuen Woo-ping will admit that something like that climax Once Upon a Time in China took like so long to shoot, like more than a month, I believe, while something like Drunken Master took, I don't know, 30, 50 days. Not that long, relatively.
I'm sure he had the same experience that Jackie Chan had in Hollywood, where they were always amazed that the fight scenes would be filmed in like 2 days and the dialogue scenes were supposed to be filmed in like 30 days.
Yeah. They're like, wait. No, it should be the opposite, because that's why people come to these movies. As you mentioned, Will, that with this new wave of essentially, kind of wuxia that happened in the 90s, this new style that was basically defined by two people, Ching Su-tong and Choi Hark. Ching Su-tong, he brought this expressionist, almost abstract idea to wuxia of the way that people move, the way that wire work is done. It had been done before in Shaw Brothers films, Taiwanese films, but it had never been done like you would see in stuff like Swordsman, Swordsman 2, and all the other Choi Hark, Ching Su-tong collaborations. And you feel in something like Iron Monkey that Yuen Woo-ping is trying to figure out, okay, then what is my stamp on this? And what's cool about Iron Monkey is that it actually works in a context that if you're a North American viewer, you're like, I understand this. This is mass superhero stuff. Very simple, vigilante. It makes sense why this is the one that Miramax went to when Yuen Woo-ping had his craze. And they're like, all right, which one should we re-release theatrically? And they went for Iron Monkey.
Now, in the mid to late 90s, his directorial career kind of tapers off as he does more and more choreography for other people.
And he's getting old, too.
He came back in 2010 with True Legend, his first directorial effort in 15 years, which was based on the character of Beggar So, another folk hero who his father played in Drunken Master.
Which can also be seen in the Stephen Chow film, King of the Beggars, which, will it surprise you, that film was choreographed by Yuen Woo-ping.
Yuen Woo-ping is also the credited director on Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Sword of Destiny.
A very troubled production, and I think that the movie shows that.
I've actually never seen it.
Not good, bad. And he's also directed The Thousand Faces of Dunjia in 2017, which for a long time was being named as Miracle Fighters 2, but it's not really related. And in that Film Lincoln Center interview, Yuen Woo-ping is like, yeah, the first one's better.
And more recently, his most recent feature-length directorial credit, Master Z, The Ip Man Legacy, with Michelle Yeoh and Dave Bautista, a lot of fun.
Yeah, super fun.
And that sees him adapting to a new trend in Hong Kong and Chinese action movies, the Ip Man cycle.
The idea of like, all right, we're grounding it back down to serious, not very jokey. Can you do this, Master Yuen? And he's like, yeah, no problem. And he does it. And I think that, he said himself that he's worked with basically every action star that was in Hong Kong. And at this point, his career is filled with such gold and trend-setting stuff. He doesn't really need to be out there like making movies anymore.
He's also 77.
Yeah, has a passion for it. He's talked about on stuff like The Matrix that they gave him very specific storyboards of the action that they wanted, and he just went on his own and just did what he wanted to do. When he showed it to the Wachowski sisters, they were like, yeah, that's good. Let's just do what you did. And supposedly that was a conflict with Kill Bill, is that Quentin Tarantino had it down so much what he wanted in his mind that Yuen Woo-ping was like, why am I here? Okay, I'll train the cast, but this is like, why am I'm just training people? Like, is this all that you want me to do?
I would say, in lieu of my ability to perfectly summarize what makes a Yuen Woo-ping fight scene, I would just say that there are a very small number of filmmakers over the years who have been able to just crack open a rock and unleash pure cinematic pleasure out of it, And he's there with George Méliès.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's there with Busby Berkeley. He's a guy who, like, when you watch the movies, there's just something so uncomplicated about bodies moving on screen,
And everybody is following in his steed. Like, a lot of the choreographers, they would look at what Yuen Woo-ping is doing and it's like, okay, he figured it out. How can we do variations of this? Because this is clearly the best that it can ever get.
Yeah, when you think of Hong Kong action movies after 1980, you're thinking of him.
So, as per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. And our first letter is from Andrew Brown. And he goes, Dear Justin and Will, Thanks for the solid free podcasting. I was curious about a quirk you two continually show whenever a film is over 2 hours. You're almost sure to complain. I think this is a misguided criticism. Not only is 2 hours a pretty average film length these days, but also each movie is differently paced and doesn't necessarily feel its lengths, whether long or short. Both of your Letterboxd accounts indicate love for some of these longer movies, so it seems inconsistently applied. Cheers, Andrew.
Well, first of all, we're right on everything we say.
Yeah, never wrong, ever. Never go back on our opinions.
And I would just like to say, you know, people are always saying, oh, you have.
They're trying to, gotcha.
Yeah, they're trying to do a generalized take on a tendency that we have. But I just want to say, point me specific examples. What are specific examples of movies I said were too long that I was wrong to say that about? Because I bet you won't find any.
I think it comes down to, it's true that most films are 2 hours long. So to complain now, to be like, the good old days of 90-minute movies, it's like, nah, they're all 2+ hours. Yeah, that's true. And I will also say there's lots of movies that I love that are more than 2 hours.
Oh yeah,
tons of them.
I don't think we were here complaining when we watched Satan Tango that it was too long at 7 hours.
No, we complain when a movie could clearly be 90 minutes and it's 2 hours long.
Speaking of which, on Patreon this week we talk about Rob Zombie's The Monsters, which at 110 minutes is too long.
Way too long. And it's not just like we save half an hour in our lives, which that adds up. It's also, once you move past the point of why is this still going? You get the sense of like, that's what kind of drills into your mind because that's how you're ending the picture.
By the way, I watched a couple episodes of the Jeffrey Dahmer Netflix show this week, 10 episodes. And I just want to say, every 10 episode miniseries should be a 110-minute movie. Okay,
I agree.
It's like you're watching this fucking show, and it's like, oh my god, am I going to see every single thing he ever did? Are we just going to like sit here forever? Jesus Christ.
Well, it comes down to the idea of like, what is storytelling, right? Like, what do you need as a viewer to kind of get the full picture and come away satiated? And I think 90 minutes, that's the time most of the time.
And that's why RKO was right to cut 40 minutes out of The Magnificent Ambersons.
Absolutely. And we're going to stand on that.
They said 130 minutes, too long.
And of course, some movies need to be more than 2 hours long. Yeah, that's true. We're not saying that every movie needs to be under 2 hours. We're just saying most movies could be 90 minutes and you would not be hurt by it. Now, this is an issue that you get like at the screenwriting level that like, it's not just like, oh, we have this much footage and we cut it down to 90 minutes. Because then you oftentimes get a completely incomprehensible film. Like I was recently watching a Hong Kong film that Choi Hark produced and it was released as a 90-minute version. And only now, 20 years later, did the 2-hour version come out. And the 2-hour version makes way more sense because it was written as a 2-hour film. Did it need to be 2 hours? No, it didn't. Like, that's where you get into like the fine little details.
Oh yeah, sure. And there are lots of movies that run 2 hours or more that just have like lots of interesting little digressions that you wouldn't want to lose. That's the tree of it,
Oh so, yeah, let's get Margaret down to 90 minutes, right? let's get it going.
Let's take the thin red line and cut out all those scenes of little birds.
Why do people like this letter writer feel the need to defend that though?
First of all, I'm defending this letter writer. This letter writer is a good person.
Oh, the best.
And they listen to this podcast.
They
listen to this podcast, which makes them good.
It's happened before where I've written like, the perfect length is 85 minutes. People get like their hackles up. Like, how dare you?
Listen, we're not saying that good movies can't be 2 hours.
No.
Many of them are.
Yes.
Citizen Kane is 119 minutes, and I'm telling you, it flies by.
Mm-hmm. But if we complain about a film being 2 hours or groan when we see a film that's 2 hours, like, it doesn't need to be that long.
Listen, I do remember a very early episode of this podcast when we did Bradley Metzger, and we did Camille 2000, and I looked at the back of the box and it said 130 minutes, and I groaned. I thought, holy fuck, how can this be 130 minutes? Loved every minute of it.
So there you go.
So I'm open-minded.
And I do react better usually to a film that is 85 minutes to a film that is 2 hours long. Like, that is just the truth. When you see those Netflix films, do you know why they're that long? Because they calculated in minutes that they want, like, the minutes watched. I remember hearing about those Marvel TV shows, the Netflix ones, that the producers were like, please let us do 10 episodes. And they're like, nope, you got to do more than 10. And they're like, fuck. Like, they didn't want to. They didn't have enough story for it.
That's right, folks. That's what you're defending.
Yeah. Are the minutes that you spend in front of the screen. You know what? This letter writer, he got us.
He got us.
We're hypocritical. We like some 2-hour movies. So thank you very much for that letter. And our next letter is from Alex S. And he goes, "Hey, fellas, I was wondering if you have any particular thoughts on director Nick Millard. I've only seen a handful of his films so far. His classic Criminally Insane, The Dreamlike Satan's Black Wedding, on par with some of the best Ed Wood, if you ask me, and the truly baffling Mach 10. At least that's what the credits say. The version I saw online is improperly tagged as Gun Blast, which sounds like a hoot, but is unfortunately nowhere to be found. As far as singular inept filmmakers go, I found his work to be reminiscent of what little Doris Wishman titles I've seen, to the extent that I wonder if they were acquainted. All the best, and thanks for all the work you do. I've lost count on the number of cinematic tangents your show has sent me on." Well, thank you very much for that letter. And Nick Millard is a filmmaker I am only aware of thanks to Ben Ruffett of Hamilton Trash Cinema, because Nick Millard was a guy that did a lot of VHS movies and also has a fascinating history and filmography where he started shooting films on celluloid, and as he went along, he would recycle these celluloid films and reuse them in his shot on video ones, which creates an incredibly all over the place feel to his pictures. And he's also a very particular individual. If you read more about him, he did some hardcore pornography, but he's mostly famous for the horror films that he made. And I believe, didn't he do Crazy Fat Ethel as one of his?
Yeah, that's one of his. So as I was looking at Nick Millard's Letterboxd page, it said I'd watched 1 out of 30 of his movies, and I thought, really? Which one was it? Well, it's a movie from 1971 called Fancy Lady. It stars Ushi Degard from the Russ Meyer films. So that will tell you what kind of movie it is. It's a softcore movie where she's topless a lot. Reading my review, I didn't seem all that enthusiastic about it. But I don't know. He looks like a great subject for further research.
Oh, absolutely. This is one that should have been on the list, and I just didn't really think about it that much. His films, I don't see them get talked about that much because they are very difficult pictures in the sense of like sitting through them.
I see.
But we love that kind of stuff, and we will definitely tackle it at some point. So thank you very much for reminding us. So as per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. So next week... it's Shocktober! Which means that we're doing horror films all month long. And we're going to be starting off with a little man named Boris Karloff.
The king of horror. My God, how have we never got to Boris Karloff yet?
I thought we had. And then when you told me that we had, and I was like, I guess we did. We did Vincent Price. We did Christopher Lee. Wait, did we do Christopher Lee?
We haven't done Christopher Lee.
I feel like we've just done all of these horror guys. So, yep, Boris Karloff is one that there's a lot to talk about. Had a very long career where he just would not stop working. So, which
Are we going to watch those Mexican ones?
Yeah, where he's like on a respirator.
Ventilator, yeah.
Which one do you think we should watch, Will?
Well, maybe we should watch Frankenstein. I feel like just because like it's the key one. It's the Rosetta Stone of them all.
And we'll look at his filmography. He had a lot of horror films that he made. So I feel like there's other stuff in there that
Companies have put out like various collections of him, and I know there's one called, I think, The Man They Couldn't Hang, that's supposed to be kind of good. I don't know.
So we will be checking those out. I don't think we'll be revisiting Targets again, will we?
Nah, what
else do we have to say about Targets?
We'll talk about it, obviously, but yeah.
He's great in it. There's nothing else to say. So we'll be talking about the Gentleman Monster himself next week. And until then, my name's Justin the Clue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening. Just a reminder here that we will be having our annual Important Cinema Club 24-hour horror movie Mind Melter online this October 29th starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And for more details, just check my Twitter page, DeClueJ, DECLOUX, and the letter J. I would also like to thank some of our new Patreon subscribers, who include Keenan Ashenfelter, Graham Paul Donovan, Fighting Forwards, Adam Stewart, Michael Davies, Jerry Lally, Lucy Sherry, Caleb Clements, Calvin Vaughn, Ted Rowland, Ruben Vasquez, Coasters Galore, and Joseph DeLeo. Thank you very much for becoming patrons. We could not continue to do this without you. And now, back to your regular scheduled programming. Will went to the Review Cinema to see a little Brian De Palma movie.
Yeah, I saw Femme Fatale on 35mm. That was one of Brian De Palma's last high-profile releases, I think it's fair to say.
What are you talking about? You don't think that... Not Redacted.
Redacted. Yeah, there was Femme Fatale in 2002, and then The Black Dahlia in 2006.
I saw that one theatrically, so that was a big major film.
I've still never seen
It's bad. It's bad.
Yeah, Vilmos Zsigmond got an Oscar nomination for it.
I guess it was a hard year, and Vilmos was probably on his last legs, and they're not going to give it to him for Jersey Girl, so they had to find something.
It was that or the Mindy Project.
Yep, that's right.
I had seen Femme Fatale some years ago, and I wasn't really that hot on it. At the time, I sort of thought it was like, oh, this is kind of for the fans only. This is...
You hadn't seen Passions yet that he made? Ugh.
Well, I'll just say that I had a very good time watching Femme Fatale this week.
Very fun.
When you watch that movie, you kind of just got to appreciate the pure style of it. It's one of those pure cinema movies.
That they let De Palma just do whatever he wanted, clearly.
Oh,
that he was at a point where the studio's like, yeah, sure, De Palma, whatever you give us, we'll put it out. That's cool.
It feels kind of like a dream, that movie. There's like a weird dream logic to it.
I mean, it literally ends with it being all a dream.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You don't even remember.
That's right. It does end with it being all a dream, but it could be reality.
Yeah, you don't know. I mean, multiple De Palma films end that way.
So for the first half of the movie, I was totally lost about what the plot was. I mean...
You're like, just happy to be at the Cannes Film Festival, right?
Yeah, it was 2001 Cannes Film Festival. Presumably, everyone's going in to see Shrek.
The jurists are arguing about if the donkey should get an award of some kind.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, that opening scene at the Cannes Film Festival where it's playing to, I mean, not Bolero, but music like Bolero. Pure style, very vigorous filmmaking.
I mean, you've been someone who's been kind of De Palma agnostic for a long time.
I suppose so. I mean, well, he doesn't... hit me where I live.
He doesn't get your loins going.
Well, in this one, he sure did. Let me tell you.
Boy.
Yowza.
How was it watching it with an audience? Do you feel they were appreciating it? Were they like laughing at it or with it?
I sensed a mixed reaction to the audience. I mean, talking to Brendan, the programmer, after, he was saying that like somebody was telling him like how much he liked it, but his friend really didn't like it. Like the person behind me said something like, "God, that was one of the worst movies I've ever seen." Like
I love when people say that because you want to be like, you have not seen enough movies.
Yeah. I mean, come on.
Femme Fatale, directed by Brian De Palma, is the worst movie you've ever seen?
No movie with Rebecca Romijn can be the worst movie you've ever seen. But anyway, it was great to see on film. It was great to sort of see a movie like that in a theater and just be trapped with it. Go on that dreamscape journey with him.
Now, I was surprised that somebody else I know that never goes to movies also saw Femme Fatale. So I wonder if there's like a weird pull to it. The idea of like, oh, it's late period Brian De Palma, that he is very, famous, and this is one of his last kind of big movies, and that gets people through the door.
Yeah, I mean, there were lots of people I knew at that screening. I think it's just, there were certain screenings like right thing at the right time where Brian De Palma is very trendy with film people right now.
Is he now? Like, it feels like he's been trendy with people for the last, 2 decades.
Certainly not when this movie came out.
No, not when this movie came out.
But yeah, for the last probably 10 years, his stock has been getting higher and higher and higher. It was on film, which is an increasingly rare thing here in Toronto. We don't get as many 35 screenings.
I didn't even know that the Review could do 35mm print screenings.
Apparently they can.
Because unfortunately, I spoke to a theater manager of a place that used to show 35, and they're like, yeah, it needs to be repaired, and it's just not financially viable to do so for the few screenings that we're going to do. So it's nice to see that the Review still can. I don't even know, can the Royal still? It used to be able to, but I don't think that the owners care about that now.
I mean, the Royal isn't even a movie theater anymore.
No, it's like
you rent it.
Entertainment venue.
Pray to God the Lightbox just stays in business forever, which it might not.
Yeah, no one can see the face that I'm making.
But pray to God it does, because they're the last bastion of a place where you can still pretty consistently see film.
The thing is that 35mm projection is so difficult that it's not just wheeling in a 60mm projector, setting it up. You need 2 gigantic projectors. The bulbs are so bright that you need crazy ventilation systems to make it go out so it doesn't all catch fire.
Well, so no disrespect for the person who did the projection at Femme Fatale, because it's actually quite hard to do now. There were a couple of real changes that were a little bit dodgy.
So the framing was a little off?
Yeah, the framing was a little off, and it was just not entirely a seamless transition. I'm not saying this out of disrespect for the person person who projected it. Because,
I mean, they probably never do 35 millimeter prints anymore.
Well, exactly. And like, my hat is off to anybody who will project it and will do the hard work of sitting there in the projection booth to do it. But it just reminded me of like, this used to be a skill that like 10 teenagers at every mall theater in America were doing.
Yes.
And now, I mean, when The Hateful Eight came out a couple years ago, and there was a 75 millimeter roadshow engagement of that, I mean, there were horror stories from just all over the continent of theaters fucking it up because nobody fucking knew. And there was that movie only came out like 5 years after Avatar, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
and Avatar being the thing that killed all the celluloid projectors. I mean, we always have the Mahoning drive-in. They're never going to go digital, they said, and that they'll always have the 35 millimeter projectors ready to run.
And yeah, no, clearly this is now going to be a thing where eventually, like, you know, within 10 years, they're not even going to be doing these in Toronto anymore, like these rare ones. And like, I'll be building my calendar around road trips to Rochester and Pennsylvania where I can see the last few 35 millimeter projections.
Yeah, the Nitrate Film Festival. They won't show Nitrate anymore. They'll just be the Celluloid Festival. Remember this? They don't show this anymore.
Well, they'll call it the Silver Screen Film Festival, and they'll play a DVD of like Gold Diggers of 1933.
And the 80-year-old Will Sloan on oxygen, he'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
And drift into peaceful forever sleep.
And I'll be like, oh, DVD, remember that?
Instead of it projected in 1 second as a hollow pill right into your mind.